decipher between the two. There is much more going on than what some people want us to believe.
All right, class. I thought I'd do a really quick um, Teams meeting here. I know some of y'all are probably trying to finish up your exam that's going to be due. As you can tell here, I did put up some countdown clocks that sort of tell you when the exam is due and when the essay is due. Of course, the essay you have a couple more, 4 days and whatever the hours and the minutes and the seconds show there. But the exam, which is really due, that's the one that's sort of more of a, have importance, is due in, less than 6 hours. So at 12 o'clock midnight, whatever is not uploaded, whatever is not there, it's going to, the Dropbox is going to disappear. That particular part in your folder is just going to go gray or black. And if there's no file there for me to grade, then it becomes a 0. So granted, this particular test is only 7% of your grade, but collectively with the essay, where the other 7% comes in, it becomes 14%. So nobody can really afford to get in a 0 at this point, really on anything, just because midterm grades go out week 8, which, it's about 3 weeks away from now. So just keep that in mind. This is sort of your time limit for the exam 1 and essay 1. Again, today's the 23rd, which is Wednesday. The last time I can really look at rough drafts will be before midnight on Friday, right? So you want to send me your essay 1 rough drafts as an email attachment. I would also send it to Smart Thinking probably before Friday as well. So that would give us both sort of enough time to look at it and hopefully, get it back to you before the 11:59 deadline on the 27th, which is this Sunday. So really the earlier the better to get me rough drafts, just because, you don't want to wait too terribly late. If it's not there by Friday midnight, I'm not going to have time really to read them. If you try to send something Saturday afternoon or 3 hours before it's due on Sunday, because you've had 5 weeks to study for the exam and to get the paper done. If for the most part, I think the highest grade on the exam right now is a 96. The lowest grade has been, I think, a 78. Most folks are getting, the low A's or high B's at this point, which is really good. Being that it's the first exam and you're having to cover so much stuff in a 4 or 5 week period. If you go back and look at the actual lesson section, you can kind of notice that I've sort of opened some stuff up. So if you look at week 5 again, of course, we got the countdown clocks. We got the sort of the Dropbox for the fiction exam, we have some information about how to do some close reading, which is basically what you're doing for your essay one. I give you a sample essay one to sort of look at to give you some guidance. This is basically, this student made a 90 or higher on it. There's your Dropbox for essay one. And then we start talking a little bit about poetry, which, we're really going to focus on next week. But if you don't want to do a whole heck of a lot next week and you get finished early this week with your essay and your exam, you can go ahead and start looking at some of this stuff. One to really pay close attention to is how to quote poetry, because we're going to have to do, an essay two, and you're going to have to do some weekly writings coming up. And quoting poetry or verse is a lot different than quoting short stories and that type of stuff. So you want to pay close attention to that. I go ahead and give you your essay topic for essay two. And again, notice the due date, 25th of October, which is a Sunday, by 11:59, which again is about 4 or 5 weeks from this week. And then your sample poetry exam for exam two will be due on Sunday, November 1st by 11:59. So you probably want to print some of this stuff out and keep or save it so you have it, for the weeks to come. If you go back to the lessons, notice there's week 6. That's really next week. There's a discussion that's due, on the 4th of October. These are hyperlinks to the poetry. We're looking at 2 sonnets by Spenser and 2 sonnets by Sidney. So I give you some more handouts about the imagery and stanzas and that type stuff. The weekly writing, I give you a particular topic, which is sort of similar to your bigger paper for poetry. So I'm giving you some practice, comparing and contrasting poems and poets. So that's something you can go ahead and get started on if you don't want to wait until, the middle of next week, to start week 6. If you go back, there's week 7, sort of the same deal. That week, you're going to have a quiz over the poetry that we read, which is basically 2 poems by the Romantic poet William Blake and 2 poems by another Romantic poet, John Keats. And I give you some other stuff here to sort of look at. If you go back, we have week 8, which is basically midterm week. We don't really have a midterm here, but like I said, that's when I'm going to send whatever your grade is that Blackboard is showing back to the college. And if you're doing enrollment, it's going to go to your high school coordinator. And if you're not doing so well, you're probably going to get a phone call or an email or a text. As you can tell here, I give you specific sonnets. This is basically a hyperlink to our e-text. You're just going to have to scroll down to find these sonnets, basically sonnet 18, 116, and 130. We have another weekly writing thing to do that's going to be due on the 18th of October. And if you go, we have week 9, which is that week we're basically going to finish our unit on poetry. There's a couple things here. I still got to fill this out a little bit. As it gets closer to week 9, there will be a couple more stuff, a couple more items there, a couple more poets and poems, and some sort of a weekly assignment, probably another quiz. And then when we go to week 10, obviously, when it gets closer to week 10, you will have your Dropbox for the poetry exam and the poetry paper. So pretty much everything is sort of laid out from now until really about the beginning of November, where we basically start our last unit, which would be drama, and that's where the research paper would come in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, week 11, week 10. So you can go ahead and sort of prepare for that. The other thing is, and I think I mentioned this last time, is that you need to go ahead and, if you haven't already for another class, you need to go ahead and create this ProctorU account before we go to Thanksgiving break, the middle of November, because when you take the final exam, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that before we go on the break of Thanksgiving, you're going to have ProctorU account, ProctorU up and running, and you're going to have a webcam. If you don't have a webcam or you can't afford one, then you're going to have to go to your closest testing site, which would be, the college in Waycross or the college at Golden Isles or the college at Camden, because you're going to have, one, the ProctorU account, and two, a webcam. If you don't have those two things, you're not going to be able to take your final exam. And that's not just for this class, that's for any other class that you're doing online that requires ProctorU. So just some heads up for the rest of this week and for week 6 through week 10. You can work ahead. I will still kind of do, the pre-recorded meetings and the weekly Teams meetings if you can make them. But don't think that you have to necessarily stay on week 6. If you want to work ahead, if you feel comfortable about working ahead, you can. We will try that out to see how that works. If it works well for you, great. If it don't, then just keep doing what we're doing. Just remember, each week stays open from one Sunday to the following Sunday. So you basically have about 6 or 7 days to get the reading done, to print out any of the handouts or save any of the handouts, and to do any of the weekly assignments, writings, or quizzes. With the papers, the big papers and the exams, you basically have 4 or 5 weeks to study and get those rough drafts written. And that's how the drama section is going to be sort of set up. The drama exam, which is really going to be your final, is going to be a little bit different than the poetry exam and the short story exam. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as it gets closer to the first week of December. But really, that exam is going to be something that you're going to have to be able to do not in 2 hours, but in 60 minutes. So again, we will talk a little bit about that. Good luck with exam 1, because as you can know, your time is starting to tick away on that. And good luck with the fiction essay. Please send drafts if you can before the deadline of midnight this Friday. I should have a good bit of your exams graded before Sunday. Your essays will probably take maybe another week or so, just because I'm getting essays from other classes. But you should have a grade for that particular paper way before you have to turn in essay 2. And again, if you need any help or anything, send me a message, send me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Have a good week. Have a good week next week. And again, next week I send out another weekly Teams meeting thing, and we'll probably have a sort of like a pre-recorded video on Monday that deals a lot more with the poetry that we're going to read for week 6. Have a good night.